What up, y'all? It's your hometown hero, the real Adam Coleman, kicking it with my man MJ Jackson, aka Action Jackson. Y'all know what it is, man. We're about to do a critique of Sebastian Kole, who was recently on Side Netter TV. Stay tuned, and we're gonna get it popping.
There was a Trinity Radio episode.
Because you guys preach stuff that is like literally unrecognizable to an ancient African.
You know what I'm saying? It's urban apologetics. You know what I'm saying? I gotta show them like they did with the gospel.
Man, y'all see what I'm doing here, man. Y'all see what your boy doing here, man. You know what I'm saying? I'm taking notes from my man. Alfredo Valance and Alex McElroy. Shout out to Alex who showed me how to do that. I've been trying to do that for the longest. I just haven't figured out how to do it, man. So, what's going on, man? What's happening with you? You see, I'm trying to do it, man. I'm trying to grow on the channel, bro. I'm trying to do better, man. What's happening with you?
I'm gonna have to make me one for me and Chris Brian Samuel when we going in. I like that.
Oh, you should, bro. That'd be dope. That'd be dope, man. That'd be fire, bro. That'd be fire. Definitely. Well, it's good to have you on the channel, man. Is this the first time? Like,
no,
as far as one-on-one, like with just us two, or
nah, this is probably the second. I think the first time was when me and you did something on Browder.
Oh, that's right. That was on my channel. That's right. I couldn't remember if that was on my channel or if that was on your channel. That's right. That's
yeah.
Right. Cool. Well, it's good to have you back, bro. Good to have you back. You know what I'm saying? I'm about to share. Actually, I would encourage y'all to share and like this joint as we get started. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to the people we got in the chat. We got Tyler Lott out here. Adrian Jones in the building. Thank you, sir. Adrian Jones is feeling he's feeling the intro, man. He's feeling it. You know what I'm saying? Trying to do it,
yes,
man.
Sir.
I'm trying to be like the big dogs in there, man. You know what I'm saying? But I gotta get that intro down. You know how Alfredo does like the serious one-liner? I gotta get that down, man. That's like an art right there. That's like an art right there.
You know, I like the way Vocab does. He come in with the music, and then he'd be like, "Let's go." Yeah. Then he, so I'm aiming for that. So we'll see.
Right. Well, Vocab, man, he has like all the sound effects and like the echoes and stuff. He's a Star Wars head, so I think that's kind of what contributes to it. You know what I'm saying? So while I'm sharing this, man, tell us what's been going on with you, man. Then we're going to go ahead and get into the information of why we're here, man. Just kind of let people know what you've been up to, what you're doing, and all that.
I have been, on a personal level, I've been personal and ministry, but I've been in the process of finishing my first master's degree in theology, apologetics, and leadership. At Liberty, I was debating if I was going to proceed right into a PhD or perhaps do a second master's. I'm gonna have to pray about that, but that's what I've been doing kind of, behind closed doors on my channel, the Urban Christian Institute. Me and Chris Brian Samuel have been picking up the pace a little bit, working together, really tackling some cultural religious and socio-religious political issues, trying to offer answers coming from a biblical worldview. I think that we've been doing a pretty good job. That chemistry right there is good. Even thought about writing a book with the brother. I think that he's going to go ahead and write the book because I'm just tied down a little bit, but maybe one day we'll come together and write a book together or something like that. But yeah, we've just been working together, just tackling these issues, trying to offer a political perspective from King Jesus. And that is political. Jesus is king. That has political connotations. So you can't hitch it. You can't hitch a Porsche to a broke down wagon, either on the left or the right. You just got to let it be what it is. So that's what me and Chris been doing. And of course, I still dib and dabble with a little bit of comedicism, a little bit of atheism and stuff like that on the side.
Yeah, well, actually, that kind of takes us to why we're here now, man. Is you know, you and I were talking a couple weeks ago, you know, because we have that in common, where we tend to focus a lot on Comedicism. We tend to focus a lot on dealing with atheism, particularly in the African American context. So, you know, we just been, you know how we do, man. We talk on just about like a daily basis. I'm pretty sure, and you know, we've been seeing people, you know, pop up on some popular platforms, you know, not taking any jabs or anything like that. But we've been seeing folks pop up on some well-known platforms, i.e. Signer TV, who are advancing atheism in the African American context. So, you know, we talked about collabing on it. So I guess this will be the first of a couple series, man. So y'all can stay tuned. Just how we get down with Alfredo Valentin, BK Apologist on the channel. You know, shout out to him. You know, it's dope just kind of having you on so we can launch into this stuff. So, you know, we're going to be doing this dialogue, or at least the beginning of it. We're going to be doing on this channel, and then we'll definitely be, you know, flowing on to yours, man. So definitely subscribe to MJ Jackson's channel, man. So, man, it's the Urban Christian Institute, right?
Yes, sir. The Urban Christian Institute. Yes, sir.
Cool. So, you know, for my mods, man, in the chat, definitely go ahead and throw that in the chat so people can subscribe. So, with that being said, the matter at hand, man, I'm trying to be cordial, man, but you know, so we watched a gentleman by the name of Sebastian Kole, who apparently is I guess he's a well-known music artist. It seems like he's more sort of a songwriter, kind of behind the scenes, kind of a guy. And he was recently on Sinetta. I mean, he's going hard for atheism, bro. Like he's really he's not playing around, man. You know, he's really trying to push it. You know what I'm saying? He's really trying to push it. And you know, what were your initial thoughts on that? Because you know, we've talked a lot about it, but you know, before we get into this video clip, what were your initial thoughts?
Well, you know, Sinetta's channel is like the Apollo.
Yeah.
You know, once you make it to his platform, you've arrived.
Yeah, it's the big time right there. Yeah,
that's the big time. Sinetta's like the Don King of the conscious community. And you know, I have been watching Mr. Sebastian Kole for a minute, and you know, we would see him give these talks where he's, you know, it seemed like he's constantly doing reductio ad absurdums to, you know, certain either political viewpoints or things within the culture that just are kind of dumb. And you know, he would be giving these little talks on his Facebook live channel. So, you know, I kind of heard him. He's kind of charismatic, very entertaining, has a nice voice. So you know, I heard him. So I've been watching him, and then lo and behold, you know, Sinetta has him on his channel, and this has been something that Sinetta's doing. He's kind of easing atheism onto his audience. I think that you pointed this out years ago, that, you know, Comedicism was just kind of sort of a doorway. Ultimately, that would lead to this. I think you was the first to call it, and why, you know, bingo.
Yeah, man. I mean, I have been saying it for a while. I'm not saying like I'm a prophet or something like that.
Yeah.
But I do believe that many, if not most of these Afrocentric, I'm just calling them Afrocentric just for the sake of people understand what we're talking about. But many of these Afrocentric worldviews, spiritual systems, so forth, I think that for African Americans, they're often kind of gateway drugs to some form of atheism in the strong form, or some sort of agnosticism. You know, I think it's just kind of it's kind of like a layover. You know what I'm saying? You know, when you're traveling a long distance and you have a layover in a particular city, I think many of these worldviews are a layover. But you know, for many of them, the end destination is atheism. Because I think, honestly, particularly for people who are coming from a more who has some sort of education or whatever, you know, these claims that a lot of these worldviews are making are just garbage. I mean, and no rational person can hold to them. And so, you know, you might invest yourself into them for a while, but ultimately it just doesn't hold up. And so I think that a lot of people may get there and then end up, you know, as an atheist. And, you know, actually you'll see in this video, this guy actually, you know, describes that very thing, you know what I'm saying, where he makes this transition from, you know, supposedly being a Christian, that's what he says he was, and making his way toward being an atheist. And so for somebody like myself, yeah, I think that while it's not blowing up necessarily right now, this whole thing about atheism in the African American context, I do think that it's something that we're going to see on the rise, continually on the rise. I think that, unless the Lord intervenes, there'll be a sharp spike in it within a relatively short time. So, we need to make sure that we're equipping ourselves with defenses for the biblical worldview to address the types of objections and questions that they bring to bear, man. I think that's important, which of course is why I wrote my chapter here in the Urban Apologetics book. I promise you, I feel like I'm doing this too much now, but it just comes up in conversation. You know what I mean? So I have to put people onto it. I wrote chapter 11 here on Black atheism, so people can check that out. And I got to pause for a second and say shout out to my brother Phil Fox, man, for the super chat, man. Wow, thank you, bro. I appreciate that, my man. I appreciate that. Phil Fox, man, he's been a supporter of the show. I've been on his show. Y'all make sure y'all subscribe to Mr. Phil Fox on his channel. He's definitely got a dope channel, Tears for Hope and whatnot. Ministries rather, and he does a podcast. Definitely a great dude. Thank you, bro, for the super chat, man. I really definitely appreciate that. And I got another child on the way, so you know what? That's gonna go directly towards diapers. So my kids appreciate it too. You know what I mean? These diapers ain't no joke. I think people probably know that I got another number 5 on the way, man. So y'all be in prayer for your boy.
That's a whole squad right there.
Yeah, man. We gotta start in 5, man. I need to start getting them in the gym now. You know what I mean? So by the time they grow up, that's my retirement plan at this point. You know what I'm saying?
Your ministry can be fully funded.
Yeah, man. Yes, sir. So yeah, man, I guess we'll go ahead and get into the video. This is a good old fashioned breakdown. You know what I mean? We're going to get into it. I have some slides. Okay, somebody says, okay, yeah. All right, so somebody asked a question. We'll get the questions probably at the end. So we'll work our way through some information. If we have some time, we'll get questions at the end. But we do have some content that we want to get out, and we'll get back to that. So if the moderators can keep track of questions as they come up, and if you do have a question, then we'll get to that towards the end of the broadcast. We always answer super chat questions first, just out of respect for those who are given to the channel, and then any other questions we'll try to tackle them as we can. All right, so all right, let's get it in, man. Let's take a look at this clip. Now, here's the thing, y'all know how I can get down. I mean, and Matt Jackson's the same way. Like this, I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that this video right here. Oh wow, okay, dang, I got it. Phil Fox, man, he's back in the game, man. He's hitting us with another, man. Thank you, bro. I appreciate it. Man, wow, yeah, I'm just humbled, man. I'm humbled.
Bless you, Reverend.
Thank you, bro. Thank you, man. Appreciate it. I mean, I joke around a lot, but it's really stuff like that allows me to do what it is that we do here at Tru-ID. Y'all, I mean, for anybody who knows, has been following the channel for a while, y'all seen some of the funky backgrounds and where I was struggling with trying to edit stuff, and all those like all of that support comes together, and it allows me to put out a better product for people to receive the gospel. You know what I'm saying, and hear this information that we got going on, man, and allows me to dedicate the time to it in order to put into it, that kind of stuff. So seriously, I really appreciate it. So again, we're gonna go through these clips, man, and man, this one could have been a 4-hour deal right here, bro. As far as our responses, man, like this man said, and no disrespect to Sebastian Kole, I don't know the brother. He seems like a nice guy, but he said so many things that were just all base. Like we really could have. I'm not exaggerating. We really could have done 4 hours of responses. But for this segment, we're not gonna hit y'all with 4 hours. Y'all can breathe easy. We're not gonna do you like that. We're just gonna review a couple clips. We're gonna review a couple clips, and then we'll finish it out on my man MJ's channel. When we'll do like a part 2 to this right here. But he's on Sinetta's channel, and he's answered some questions just to kind of set up a context. Apparently, he had a previous conversation with a gentleman where they were setting up a debate or something like that, and he was covering points that he made in that previous conversation. So yeah, somebody said Adam got hyped for 4 hours. Pretty much, y'all know how we do. You say I definitely could have. This could have been a 4-hour joint, man. You never know. All right, so here we go. Let me cue up the video, and we're gonna get started here, man. I see you got that Baptist preacher wipe going over there, MJ. That must mean you really about to come with some fire, bro. I see it in you, man. You hot already, boy.
We'll see.
Ready to go in, man. Ready to go in. All right, give me a second here. Let me bring up the video. All right. And if you haven't already, hit that like button, that share button. I think.
What was it like for you growing up?
Let me get my little caveat. I'm pretty sure I edited out all the cuss words, but just in case, you know what I mean? Just, guard your wife, guard your kids or something like that. It was, you never know. All right. Let me just, I just want to preface that in case we have any kids in the audience. All right, here we go.
So what was it like for you growing up?
I'm from Birmingham, Alabama, first and foremost. Heart of the Bible Belt. I'm the son of two pastors. Wow. I actually studied theology for a master's degree. So I grew up quite the Christian, quite the believer. Was very dead set. I even was a Hebrew Israelite for a while, right?
Oh,
and so I walked that path. But what led me down the Hebrew Israelite path was the fact that I felt like the normal Christian hypothesis just didn't answer enough questions. I felt like the Hebrew hypothesis answered more questions than the normal Christian hypothesis. But then I kept asking questions and realized the Hebrew hypothesis didn't answer that either. So just over time, I felt my belief slipping away. No disrespect. No disrespect to those who practice that, Christianity or Hebrew Israelite or Islam or whatever you may practice. But my inquiring mind led me to keep asking questions. And the more questions I asked, the more answers I got. And I just felt my belief slipping away in the overall.
What?
All right, so that's the first clip right there, man. I got a few things I want to say on that, but MJ, you want to take the first stab at it, bro?
Yeah, this brother makes an excellent case study for what we're doing tonight and for what you have been doing in your last two dialogues on Mr. Sinet's channel. Okay. I want you to look at, one, I just want to point out something subtly. This brother went from Christianity to Hebrew Israelism, and he said that the Christian hypothesis was not answering a certain question. I would think that people would most likely only go to Hebrew Israelism for things having to do with identity that they feel like Christianity is not answering. But he used the word hypothesis. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I totally respect it. I think this brother is ahead of the game in terms of worldview analysis, because you can also think of a hypothesis as a worldview. So I'm glad that this brother pointed out that he was viewing Christianity in terms of hypothesis. And the reason for this is that every single person alive today has a worldview. So whenever you hear him say hypothesis, worldview, just think of worldview. Okay. Every single person has a worldview for which they interpret the world around them and their experiences. Okay. A person worldview also deals with the categories of theology, anthropology, metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, and things like that. And it functions as a person's eyeglasses, which helps them see the world. We can think this as a conceptual scheme by which they make judgments about also other worldviews. So when this brother says that the Christian hypothesis was not answering enough questions, I'm happy on the one hand that he's looking at it from a big picture viewpoint, and I'm curious to know just what these questions were that were not being answered. Furthermore, and this is for the audience, when we are choosing a worldview, a person must deal with what I think is three serious questions. On what grounds can a person make a reasoned choice among worldviews? Which worldview is likely to be true? And what is the best and most promising way to approach these overall questions? Furthermore, when faced with these questions, people are faced with the choice among competing hypotheses of worldviews. A person has the responsibility to choose the one that, when applied to the whole of reality, gives us the most coherent picture of the world. And so I would like to know more about this brother's process that he went through and why he thinks whatever he's subscribing to is consistent, coherent, and livable? I like to know.
Right. Facts, man. Facts. I'm going to actually kind of repeat some of that because I have a slide here on my show. Excuse me, in just a second. But while I'm doing it, I think there's a little bit of clipping coming through on your audio, so I'm not sure what can be done to adjust it. But that being said, cool. But actually, I do before I even get to my slide, man. I want to shout out my dude Noble. I was about to give his government name, DJ Noble. I don't know if he wants to give his government name or not, but shout out to my man DJ Noble's in the chat, man. We've been kicking it since forever, man. So he actually has a podcast as well, man. Matter of fact, Noble, put your podcast in the chat, bro, so people can subscribe to it as well, man. I'll be having him on the show hopefully pretty soon. Shout out to my man Apologetics in Detroit. I'm gonna see him next week. I'm mad at him though because they're about to go see that Shang-Chi movie without me, man. But I'm a forgive him though. I'm gonna forgive him. But yeah, let me get to this slide right quick because actually I wanted to echo some of the things that you said. Let me bring that up now. All right,
Adam, just take your time. I'm gonna have to do a quick reset real quick.
Okay, cool. So when it comes to the things he was pointing out, actually I'll keep rolling till MJ Jackson comes back in. First of all, I think that there's a misconception about the biblical worldview, even amongst Christians, right? There's this idea that for some reason, having an inquiring mind is antithetical to what it means to be a Christian. And I think that some Christians are mistaken about that. And then I think that there are atheists seemingly like Sebastian Kole here who are mistakenly critical of Christianity along those lines. But again, as Matt Jackson was pointing out, is when you think about what he calls the Christian hypothesis, right? The first thing that came to my mind is hypothesis for what, right? Because when I look at the biblical worldview, I'm not just looking for an explanation, say, for like the physical world and that's it. I'm looking at it from the standpoint of a worldview that answers reality's biggest questions in various different aspects. And so actually I divide it up into three categories, and there's different ways we can do it. Matt Jackson just did, but maybe a slightly different look at it. When you think about the natural world, there's tons of questions that we can ask about the natural world. We can think about the order, function, and complexity that we find in different regions of the natural world. But then a whole different realm of exploration would be questions about the mind. Now some, of course, naturalists might want to argue that, but nevertheless, when you dig into the literature in terms of like what is the mind and all those kinds of things, you're going to have to delve into more than just science. I'm saying you have philosophers who have a great deal to say about it. Even those who kind of straddle the fence between neuroscience and philosophy have a lot to say about it. So you're venturing beyond just the hard sciences. But even beyond that, abstract objects. I'm thinking about things like mathematics, the rules of logic, logic itself, aesthetics. What does it mean for something to be beautiful? I could have put morality up there. What does it mean for something to be good, objectively good, or objectively evil? When you think about a hypothesis, like in terms of, particularly the way that MJ was framing, I like what he was saying about how we can use that in some ways interchangeably with the term, worldview. There's more to it than just science. But I think as you'll see as the video goes on, that what this gentleman is putting on the table really amounts to what we might call scientism. You know what I'm saying? Is where every question is relegated down to what is demonstrable scientifically. And if you can't bring something into that realm, then all of a sudden you've got a problem with your worldview. But in fact, we're talking about a hypothesis, particularly for the type that you would want to live your life by. There's much more to be accounted for just beyond, the physical world. So I want to say too, he's going to say a lot about science. I want to kind of deal with this up front because then I won't have to keep, stopping and pointing out these things later. But I just wanted y'all to kind of be on the lookout for how he positions science as being antithetical to or contrary to, religion, and then, particularly Christianity. This is going to be something that he does, throughout each of the clips to some extent or another. And again, I think this is something that to some extent, I think sometimes Christians are mistaken as well in terms of understanding where the whole project of science fits into the biblical worldview. Is it the case that you can't earnestly engage in scientific pursuits and at the same time, be a Bible believing Christian. Is that really true? Well, obviously not, because you have several Christians, both past and present, who were committed to their scientific work and at the same time believed that there was a God, and particularly the Christian God who presided over it all. So I'm thinking about somebody like, excuse me, actually, I'll just start on our own heritage tradition, like George Washington Carver, for example. He's a underappreciated, scientist, here of the American tradition, who was a devout Christian, and yet he made several. He was no stranger to the lab. He made several, findings that are still valuable today. Oh, okay, MJ's back. So he was certainly somebody who valued Christianity, his Christian worldview, and didn't see it as being contrary to his scientific endeavors. Now, with that being said, we can even go back to really the birthing of the, I guess we can call it, modern science. How we see science worked out in our society today. Actually, I've got a whole lecture on this on my channel, so I had to put that up. But several of the big wigs, or the big dogs, if you will, the OGs of the modern science era, were Christians. Whether it be Isaac Newton, certainly was a Christian. Francis Bacon, to whom the scientific method, some people credit that to him and the way that he went about doing his work and kind of organized experiments and things like that. People credit Francis Bacon for that. We can think about Johannes Kepler. We can think about people today, like John Polkinghorne, who was an astrophysicist. We could talk about another gentleman, I don't know why, Francis Collins, who is presided over the recent Human Genome Project. You know what I'm saying? He professes to be a Christian. So again, past and present, we have several people who clearly saw no contradiction between being a Christian and earnestly pursuing science. Now, I said all that to say, I do believe that scientific exploration fits very well within the biblical worldview. It's not something that we need to relegate to the secularists to involve themselves in. Actually, I would ground scientific pursuits in the Imago Dei, right? I talk about this all the time, and actually, I'll probably just put it in the description of this video, the talk that I do on the Imago Dei. But an aspect of being made in the image of God is this assignment that we have to steward the earth in a way that reflects God's nature and his will for creation, right? God intends for us to harness this physical world and make something out of it, do some things with it. We're not just supposed to be sitting around, eating apples under trees. Like, God really wants us to use the rational faculties that he gave us and steward the earth. Well, in order to steward the earth effectively, it helps to know a little something about it, right? And so when it comes to scientific exploration, that project of exploring God's creation, certainly you can find that situated within the Imago Dei in terms of our assignment to steward the earth. I'm saying studying, gaining knowledge about the natural world so that we can better steward it. Aside from that, contrary to what this gentleman seems to think, I'll say this point later and reiterate it. I'll say it now and reiterate it later. But when it comes to the physical world, I mean, we see all throughout Scripture, it's replete with statements about how the physical world really screams out, God's majesty and his glory, the amazing things about him. So when we study the physical world, we learn more and more about this great God, about this the wonderful works that are done by this God that we serve. Like, so it's not this matter of oh man, we just got to leave science to these people over here. No, we can praise God for this physical realm that we are endowed with rational faculties and able to study. So I think it was Isaac Newton, as a matter of fact, he said something to the effect of, when he was doing his work, he was praising God and thinking his thoughts after him. You know what I'm saying? So it was this notion of discovering what this great God has done. So whether it be to harness the world and be good stewards over it, or to explore more of this, the wondrous works of God, and ultimately, which kind of result in praise and exemplifying his majesty, in either case, we have good reason and to engage in science, and we have a sound foundation for that. So rather than being a limitation, we actually have good reason to be compelled to engage in scientific pursuits. Matt, I see you back in the building, man.
Yeah. What can you hear me good?
Yeah, it sounds good, man. Sounds good,
Okay,
bro.
okay. What did I
Shout
kind
out
of
to
miss?
shout out to BW. You mentioned James Tour. I'm glad you mentioned him. He's another Christian that deals with microbiology. You know, he's a Christian. Well, I was just talking about how. Well, I piggybacked on what you were saying about the hypothesis, and how I was saying that it goes beyond just the physical world, right? This when we're talking about a worldview level hypothesis, we're talking about something that deals with metaphysics. You know, we can talk about abstracts, we can talk about mathematics, logic, aesthetics. Getting into mind, which I think you're going to go beyond the natural sciences. You're going to have to dig into some philosophy for that. So you want to have a robust hypothesis that can cover all those things. And then also talked about how the Imago Dei is actually a grounding for scientific pursuits. The fact of the matter is, given that we are entrusted with this task to steward the creation in a way that honors God, it makes a lot of sense that we would know a lot about it. And being able to learn about it, we can actually harness it even better. But then also, when it comes to just our relationship with God, the more we learn about creation, the more we learn about how awesome creation is, it actually gives us cause to worship God all the more. And so either way, we have at least two good reasons for pursuing science that fit within the biblical worldview and should compel us to be very curious about the physical world that we've been placed in, and to do our due diligence to learn about it. So that's basically awesome. Where I was going. Excellent. Yeah, man. Sorry, cool. With that being said, I kind of just wanted to set the stage for some of the comments you're going to make, because this is something that's very common. Atheists want to they want to make it so that seem as though there's some sort of wedge between science and Christianity, and I'm just saying that's completely false. Science fits very well within the biblical worldview. We have a grounding for it. All right, cool. So let me get back to, let's go to this next clip here.
What was the kick for you that made you say, you know what? Nah, I gotta just become an atheist until I found out a little more about God. I need to find something out because all this stuff is not working. What was it for you that made you say, I'm done?
You know what, man? Honest to God, there was a brother Unc. Shout out to brother Unc.
Yes, brother sir. Unc, shout out to Unc, the God killer.
Yeah. Was one of the first people who really, like, just listening to him, it brought up questions. And I've always been an inquiring mind. You know what I'm saying? Like, the question why is one of my favorite questions. Why do we do that? Like, what's the point? And so brother Unc had brought up a few things that I again, in my hypothesis, it just didn't answer that question. The God hypothesis just did not answer that question. And so it wasn't that I thought to myself, let me become an atheist. It was just over time, that doesn't make sense. And that don't add up. And that don't add up. And so just over time, I felt that belief slipping away. I didn't go become a scientist, or, I didn't just make one morning, wake up and go, oh, I'm done with God, or nothing like that. Just over time, that belief slipped. God.
All right. Uh-oh. You're about to start spiced up here in a minute, man. What you got to say about that?
Well, I mean, you heard him, and I like the fact that he pointed out that over time his beliefs were slipping, and that should cue everybody in to the fact that some of these things, they don't take place right then and there. They happen over time, and philosophers talk about this all the time in epistemology, how maybe at the time you can't be in control over in control directly over your beliefs, but you can control whether you go and study certain things, and that in turn can have influence over what you come to believe and things like that. But he just said that over time, Christianity couldn't answer the why. Well, I beg to differ. I think that that the why and the how are getting substituted from each other. And when we talk about this, the how is more of a scientific explanation, and the why is more of a personal explanation. And when you were talking a few minutes ago, you said that these are not mutually exclusive. So you think about a murder scene, right? And you see a person lying on the ground with a knife sticking out of them. You can give a scientific explanation of how they died.
Yeah, right.
But we still need to do some more forensic investigation into why they died. And that's going to point us to a personal explanation. And so I think we should be very careful when we start confusing personal explanations with scientific explanations. But we must also remember, as you pointed out, to the fact science is not anti-God. Because if you look at the presuppositions of science and you look at the history of science, you understand that one, Christians were doing it. And two, you have to have a decent philosophy which to get science off of the ground up, because science can't prove science. You know?
Yeah, exactly right. No, you're right. Man, I gotta bring this up, man, because some people, I see Adrian Jones picked up on it, and oh yeah, shout out to William Butterfield. So it's just hilarious to me that with Sebastian, when he started that segment, he said, honest to God, and then he started going on. I'm like, well, you don't believe in God, so are you being dishonest now? It's like, should we not take your word for what you say? But it's just hilarious for me to have to hear atheists say, honest to God. And man, Phil Daggone Fox, man, is out here getting it, bro.
Lord,
that's
Jesus.
crazy, man. Appreciate you, bro. Man,
you about to make me start running like Leroy Thompson.
Right. Money. Nah, I don't rock with that. Yo, man, that's wild, man. Thank you, bro. I appreciate you, man. I appreciate you, man. I might have to go out here and ask more kids now, man. Phil Fox holding it down, man. I'm good. But anyway, my children, thank you. I appreciate it, bro. Appreciate it. He says Pampers 3 times. Oh man, thank you, brother. I appreciate it. But no, man, I think you said everything I wanted to say, and actually we'll probably come back to it after this next clip. But again, when it comes to this issue of why, I do think that he's muddying the waters between the why and the how, and we'll get more into that, in a second. Shout out to my man Ben Handelman. Thank you for the super chat, brother. I appreciate that, man. My dude Ben Handelman in the building. Good to see you up here again, man. I ain't seen you in a while, man. Appreciate you. But yeah, man. So I think that when it comes again to the why question, like my story is the opposite. For me, when I started asking the why question, that actually drove me toward Christ. It actually drove me further into the biblical worldview, because I realized that as I was asking the why question, a naturalistic worldview stopped short of answering my questions. I couldn't get all my questions answered when it came to just looking at everything naturalistically, right? There are some aspects of this human experience that fall outside of just physical explanations, right? And I just find that interesting is that sometimes I feel like atheists speak as though, and I'm not saying he's doing this necessarily, so I'm not going to put this on him, but I find in my experience as I'm talking to people, some people feel that curiosity and asking that why question somehow belongs to the unbeliever. You know what I mean? And I think, first of all, I think that's false. But secondly, I would say, I think that we should encourage people in our churches as a mode of discipleship. We should encourage people to ask questions and to pursue truth. Like we should be people of truth, right? And we should always be seeking truth. Like, I don't believe that. Obviously, I believe God exists. I don't think that God is afraid of our questions. I don't think he's intimidated by them. I think that the biblical worldview is well able to sustain questioning. You know what I'm saying? And we ought to question. We ought to ask hard questions, and so that we can be indeed mature in what it is that we say that we hold to. So rather than being some sort of, I guess, atheists don't have a monopoly, or agnostics, they don't have a monopoly on the why question. I think that the why question actually can be a stepping stone to a greater understanding of God and his world. I think that's how it's really supposed to function, right? So let's go to this next clip, if you're cool with that.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Shout out to everybody in the chat, man. We hopping in the chat right now. I appreciate y'all, man. Appreciate y'all. All right.
God exists in the gaps of your understanding.
Powerful right there. Deep.
The more you understand, the smaller your God becomes.
Facts.
1, 2. So in order to keep your God large, you run from information. If I tell you that the Big Bang happened, that offends you, because it makes your God small. If I teach you about evolution, it offends you because it makes your God small.
Right.
God did it answers 0 questions. Thus, it does not teach us anything about how reality works. And when you do not know how reality works, you cannot define and manipulate phenomena. Thus, you have no power. I'm going to show you.
Let me ask you this.
Hey, go a little bit deeper into that, man. Break that down, what you were just saying to JJ.
Thank you, man. Basically, here's the thing, man. I can start. I won't open the Bible, but if you go look at Job 37 or 38, you'll see Job getting asked questions by his friend because he was down, right? You know the story of Job. He was down, he had been sick, and he was about to give up on God. And his friend came to him and said, Job, you can't give up on God, man. Who stores up the rain in the heavens, in the storage places? Who moves the snow in its season? How do the flowers get water? And Job recognized, I don't know that. There must be a God. But see, now I do know that. There is no store place for the rain. This is condensation, precipitation, and evaporation. There is a water cycle, gorgeous, right? I used to think that God made it rain. I used to think that Thor threw down lightning bolts in his anger. But I understand static electricity. Thor went away once I understood static electricity. God gets smaller the more I understand. So really, in reality, and I say this from the purest place in my heart, I do not mean this as a disrespect. But a person who will worship a God like that is literally worshiping a shrine of their own ignorance. You bow down to what you do not know. Oh, I don't know. You wake up every morning and thank the fact that I don't know where life began. I wake up every morning to give praise to the fact that I don't know how the universe started, instead of just learning how the universe started. God is a block to information. It is detrimental to a people who need power in the world to reject the facts of the world. The only applicable knowledge is true knowledge. In other words, if you believe a thing about a thing and that thing is not true, what you believe about it is not applicable to the situation. When we know how a thing works, right? Then I should move in how that thing works. I can't go to JJ's job. JJ's he's in construction. I cannot go to JJ's job and say, okay, JJ, we about to build a house. Let's pray. No, I've got to understand construction. I got to know what screws, what nuts, what boards, what planks. I got to know how to read a blueprint. I need to know a thing so that I can manipulate things in this world. I cannot walk by the Statue of Liberty and say, man, I don't know how they got there. God must have done it. It's a lot of things I don't know how they got there, but that don't mean God did it.
Oh man, it's getting spicy now, bro. It's getting spicy.
JJ was
man. He's a funny dude, man. You know what, man? I'm keeping it light because like you say, he's a very charismatic guy. You know what I mean? I don't know the dude. I can't say he's a bad. But the man he's just misguided, bro. He's just misguided. And see, I feel like I've been beating a dead horse lately, but I got to say this again, right? Now, I want people to think back to when the video first started, right? Now, Sanetta's asking him about pretty much how he came to be an atheist, right? And the first thing that comes out of his mouth is, I'm from the Bible Belt. Both of my parents are pastors. I studied, at the master's level, to theology or something along those lines. Now, I've been saying this for a while. Like, when it comes to this, what I call former Christianism, this just shows how bankrupt it is, man. Like, people give their beginnings as a Christian and being in the church and all this kind of stuff as a credential for their current, state or whatever. It's like if they have a qualified, opinion or what have you, or perspective. And then later on in the conversation, inevitably, I said this in the talk with Brother Jabari. I said this in the talk recently with Shaka Atmos. People say that, and I'm skeptical because time and time again, people go on to then say things that are clearly like elementary false. I'm saying in terms of how the biblical worldview should be construed. I'm saying in terms of how they just basically create a straw man instead. And so this is just another example, right? This dude says, matter of fact, I got to go to. I want to pick up on something you said, if you don't mind. And then I'm gonna make a couple other points that I think will go along here. So let me share my screen.
Turn them slides up.
I got a couple. I only got a couple more, man. I promise. Yeah, I'm.
You ain't got as many as Alfredo.
Now, Alfredo would have been through 80 slides already. You know what I'm saying?
All
That
right.
like just that last clip would have been about 15 slides. You know how Alfredo gets down. But again, you said something earlier. I'm not going to harp on it again because you already, I think, explained it well. But there's a muddying of the waters between how and why questions, right? When we're talking about things that happen in the natural world, then what we're talking about is, basically what exists in the natural world and how it functions. So we can say science, and by science, I'm talking about the hard sciences, chemistry, physics, biology, things like that. You're talking about the harder sciences. Now, when it comes to things like studying the natural world, we can learn a lot. Science can tell us a lot about what exists in the natural world and how it functions, to some extent, right? It can tell us something about how it functions anyway. I would say it can't even give us a full explanation, but I'll just leave that for now. But nevertheless, it can tell us a lot about the what and the how, right? But when it comes to explanations in general, there's different levels of explanations. Right, this guy gives, and somebody called it out. Shout out to, I think it was Dylan Biggs shouted it out. That essentially what he's presenting here is the God of the gaps type of objection. He's saying that, as he said, at the outset of that clip, that God exists in the gaps of your knowledge, and the more you learn, your God gets smaller. And I think that again, and this goes back to his fundamental misunderstanding about the biblical worldview. We're not positing that God is some sort of like one of the Greek gods or Thor that he mentioned. That's not what we're talking about. A God who exists within the natural world in some sense or the other, and is accountable, is like directly orchestrating physical occurrences. That's not what the biblical worldview is. Okay, but I think that we have to understand, like, there are different types of explanations. Like, you have your mechanistic explanations. That would be like, if I strike a match, a fire will light. There's kind of a mechanistic explanation, right? I'm talking about physical causes and physical effects, right? But then there's other types of explanations, right? That's not the only kind of explanation. So let me kind of use an example right quick. All right. There we go. Let's talk about the Model T. All right. This is a Model T Ford. Now, if somebody presents you a Model T, let's say that it still runs, right? Now, let's say that you're just a Model T or just a car enthusiast, right? You just know all about cars, okay? Now, you might be able to tell somebody, like, how the engine works, what kind of, fuel it's going to need, and how the combustion process works, and, how the gears move. You might be able to just kind of break this Model T apart piece by piece, put it back together, and tell me how each one of those pieces move, right? But no matter how much you tell me about the pieces and the workings of the Model T, none of that is going to disprove the existence of Henry Ford, right? None of that's going to disprove the existence of Henry Ford. I don't care. I mean, just think about it, just in principle, right? No matter how many facts you give me about the Model T in terms of what it's made of and how it works, in principle, there's nothing that you can say about those two categories that will disprove the existence of its creator, Henry Ford, right? So when people make this God of the gaps argument, a counter argument where they're saying, okay, well, the more we explain about nature, your God is getting smaller. What they're doing is it's literally the same type of argument that you would be trying to make as if you're explaining how the Model T shift gears and say, oh, okay, I can show you how this Model T shift gears. God doesn't exist, right? That's nonsense. That's nonsense. Because effectively what they're doing here is they're making a category error. They're giving you mechanistic explanations and trying to disprove an ultimate or personal explanation, right? That's the problem. You have mechanistic explanation. Let me go back a couple slides. I think I had the words up there. You have mechanistic explanations. We'll just say in terms of how things work, physical causes, physical effects. But then you also have ultimate or teleological explanations, right? By teleological, I mean, the purpose behind the thing. Or we could say a personal explanation. There's a personal agent, right? Going back to Henry Ford. Henry Ford is a personal agent behind the Model T Ford. And in the same way, God is a personal agent behind the creation of the universe. God created the universe, as a self-contained, freestanding universe. You know what I'm saying? Now it still exists, well, we won't get into contingency, the contingency. I'll just leave that it is. But just in terms, it's not like God is behind the scenes like the Wizard of Oz, tinkering with physical creation, making everything happen. No, he created it to function in the same way that Henry Ford doesn't have to, mess with every gear and wheel on the Model T to make it work, right? The Model T exists apart from, in some sense or another, apart from Henry Ford, and in some sense or another, creation. The physical universe exists as an entity that God created apart from himself. You know what I'm saying? So, by apart from, I'm not referring to like contingent or necessary for my philosophy friends out there. We just kind of leave that as it is. But I think it's just a category error, and I think that this gentleman misunderstands. So, when he said, "Oh, we don't need," it's not like Thor is throwing down lightning and so on and so forth. Yeah, I agree. Like God is not sitting around, like rubbing his hands together to make lightning or some friction and like zapping stuff. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a God. He's the God of the whole show, right? That's what we're talking about. And so again, I get skeptical, y'all. I told y'all, like, people say, "Oh, I used to be a Christian," all this kind of stuff. But I'm like, okay, maybe that might be true, but that doesn't tell me anything about the credibility or the validity, rather, of your arguments. You know what I'm saying? What you got, bro?
I want to know what school you went to in Alabama.
Yeah.
But like I said, I agree with you. I mean, even in the representation of Job, I mean, in Job 36:26, it says right here, yes, God is exalted beyond our knowledge. The number of his years cannot be counted, for he makes water drops evaporate.
Yeah, right.
Like, who's the audience in this text? Like, and this is just hermeneutics. Bible wasn't written to us. It was written to a certain audience. It's for us, but it's written to a certain audience. So certain things are being expressed to them where they could understand. And you can't judge the Bible by your modern standards. I mean, that's just not good hermeneutics.
No, it's not.
So
it's not.
Once again, inquiring minds would like to know, hey, where'd you go to school at? Schofield University?
Right. I mean, your curious minds want to know, man. And here's the other thing too. It kind of somewhat restate what you just said, but there's a difference between passages that are descriptive and passages that are prescriptive, right? Now he cites, one of Joe's friends saying, "Oh man, like look at the rain and look at the snow and so on and so forth." These are things that God has done, basically declaring the wonderful works of God as an indicator that God does exist and so forth. But the reality is that text and his statements about that is not intended to be prescriptive in a sense. You know what I'm saying? In other words, that doesn't encapsulate the full range of things that we ought to think about God. You know what I'm saying? Like, yes, it is the case, that God is wonderful in all his works and all those kind of things. But that doesn't mean like, oh, okay, well, this is the only thing we have to say about, why we are justified in affirming that he exists. You see what I'm saying? Why take that passage as being prescriptive in that regard? You see what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
Right. So when it comes to, again, what I was saying before, I think that the pursuit of scientific truths or facts rather fit well within the biblical worldview. I don't see any reason to think otherwise. And we don't have to rely upon this idea like, oh, okay, well, just God did it. No, I mean, we can pursue the things that God did, but even that, what I'm saying, that doesn't mean that okay, we're just stopping short of knowledge. The other thing too is he says that claiming that God did it is a knowledge stopper. That's what he says, right? And I think that's first of all, that's false. I mean, he gives a couple examples. He says that if I tell you that the Big Bang happened, you're mad at me because now it makes your God small. Well, no, it doesn't. Actually, if you knew what he was talking about, he would know that one of the main arguments for the existence of God today that is circulating today is the Kalam cosmological argument. The first one
we're like Thor when he saw the Hulk. Yes,
right, exactly, right. Yeah, please bring up the Big Bang. Talk about the beginning of the universe by all means. Because I'm going to say that, anything that begins to exist has a cause. premise one. Premise two, the universe began to exist. Apparently we already agree because he agrees with the Big Bang, but that leads to the universe having a cause. And when we break down what the universe is, time, space, energy / matter, that points to a cause that is timeless, spaceless, unimaginably powerful. You know what I'm saying? And able to create everything that we see around us. And we go even further than that. I believe that would have to be a personal cause, because if you're talking about something that's timeless, spaceless, and immaterial, either you're dealing with abstract objects or an unembodied mind, and between those two, abstract objects can't cause anything. So that leaves us with an unembodied mind who's timeless, spaceless, immaterial, and unimaginably powerful. That sounds a lot like God. So just by bringing up the Big Bang, you've given me an opportunity to now point you to a philosophical argument, which I believe has premises that are more plausibly true than the negation, and result in ultimately point toward a real God. So I think that that's nonsense when he brings up, the Kalam Cosmos, the Big Bang. Is it, that's going to make our God small? No, actually, it points us to a God who's behind all of this natural world that you agree with me began to exist, right?
Yeah.
Or evolution. To be honest with you, we could go there. To be honest, he talks about, if I bring up evolution, then now your God is small. But no, actually, we can agree or disagree. But you have many Christians who are Bible-believing Christians affirm that Christianity is true, and they believe that God used evolution as a mechanism to bring about biological diversity. And they would say maybe that he took special action with respect to the mental faculties and I was going to say ontology of mankind. But nevertheless, they don't necessarily believe that evolution proper is necessarily antithetical to the Christian worldview. Now, whether we agree on that or not, the bottom line is that's a secondary issue. That's not a primary issue. You know what I'm saying? Some people believe it, some people don't. That's fine. But evolution in and of itself is not necessarily antithetical to the God hypothesis or even Christianity specifically. Now, with that being said, if we're going to talk about evolution, then we got to talk about DNA. Because what I'm going to argue is that evolution doesn't get off the ground without there being information in DNA to bring that about, right? And to keep it going. I've got a whole video on that on my channel, so I won't go into it now. But I would argue that the presence of information in DNA points to there being a creator of it all, given the fact that we know information doesn't just come about willy-nilly. It comes from minds, So before I go further, you want to say anything about that, or?
No, let's dive in.
Okay,
but
cool.
But like I said, I agree with you. I get excited about the Big Bang. I get excited about the redshift, the expansion of the universe. By all means, let's study it.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Some people don't. Some cosmologists don't want to study it. Some cosmologists try to fudge the numbers, so to speak, because was it Einstein who was trying to fudge the numbers because he didn't like the conclusion that science was pointing to?
That's right. That's documented. That's documented. Let me give you just a quick example, then we'll get to the next clip. We're talking about evolution of information. I'll put a bow on that right quick. But I often give this example, and it's not original to me, so I'm just but I think it's helpful. So if we're walking along a beach, right, and we see a pile of sticks just sitting there, that wouldn't be unusual. Okay, fine, just a bunch of pile of sticks, maybe the water washed it up and they're just sitting there. Okay, fine. If you walk a little bit further and we see a pile of sticks, but it spells, they're arranged so that they spell danger present, turn back immediately. We wouldn't then say, that's just amazing how the wind and the waves just blew this up on the shore like that and just arranged these words just for us to come see it. And if we go a little bit further, it says Adam and Matt Jackson. This is Alfredo. You got a live stream at 5:00. You need to turn back now and get back to the studio. like you wouldn't say man, that's crazy. The wind and waves just pushed that, those sticks and just spelled this thing. That's just amazing how that happened. Of course not, right? When you see a message, then it's rational to infer that behind the message is a messenger. So when you think about DNA and you understand that the adenine, the guanine, the cytosine, and the thymine, I'm saying, are arranged, ACTG, then they're arranged along, DNA rather, in such a way that they are literally a code. They're literally a language, and they inform how but just everything you see about when it comes to biological complexity, I'm saying it really runs off of that. That instruction manual of DNA, if you will. When you see that language of life, if we can call it, then yeah, you know what? Actually, we can infer that, wait, if you have a language, if you have information, specified complexity, then we've got good reason to infer from based upon the inference to a best explanation in terms of where this language should come from, that language comes from minds, and this language that we see in DNA, we can rationally infer comes from a mind. I would say that's the inference to the best explanation. So we can talk about science, we can talk about evolution and all that, and ultimately I'm going to say that it still points back to a God behind it all, and so rather than making God smaller, all this does is point us to a God at which we can be amazed did create things in the way that he did. That's okay. That's more than okay for a Christian to engage in it. So yeah, man, you want to go to the next clip? Or
oh yeah, let's go ahead and keep it rolling.
All right, yeah.
He started out by saying, he asked me, was there an intelligent designer?
Right.
Okay. He jumped from that point to talking about a spirit and the soul. So let me start first with his argument from intelligent design. Is there any way I can share a screen with you?
Yes. You know how to do it? You did it before?
Yeah.
All right. Yes. Let's do it. Let's get it.
I want to show you guys something. Okay. You guys can see the screen?
Yes, it's up. We see it.
Okay. You see this structure right here, bro?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And do you see this structure right here?
Yep.
Okay.
Looks the same to me.
They look very similar, don't they?
Yeah.
Okay. This is a French cathedral built by one of the greatest architects known to man. Multi-million-dollar facility. It was very much so intelligently designed. This came from the mind of one man down, went to the engineers, then went to the contractors, right? From one man's mind down. This is intelligent design. Okay. This is a termite castle. 70 million termites built this. Not one of them had a design. Not one of them had a blueprint. Okay. But understand the complexity of this termite castle matches the complexity of this castle here, this cathedral. One of them was designed. One of them was not. Not one of those termites knows how to do this. We know that they don't know how to do this because if we break it, they cannot repair it. They have to go build a brand new one. Okay. It is instinct. It is natural instinct that built this beautiful cathedral. And it is intelligent design that built this beautiful cathedral. Okay. Nature has no intelligent design inherent in it. That does not mean it cannot produce complexity. I just want to put that out there because I'm tired of people saying that if a human being could define for me what a soul is, where do I find it? What does it look like? How do I affect it? What does it affect? Then I could tell you if I have one. Now, some people say, well, the soul is the mind, the will, and the emotion. Okay, then that means I can find it's the byproduct of my brain. Okay, it's just a byproduct of being awake and aware. I have mind, I have will, I have emotion. Well, if that's what you're asking for, then yes, I definitely have a soul. Does my
actually, I think I went too far. I meant to stop it at the part we were talking about that. I just got caught up,
Me too.
All right, what you got, bro?
Okay. I think that the analogies and things like that, okay. But if you live by analogy, you will die by analogy. So the Christian argument for complexity is a little bit more sophisticated than that. A lot of times when Christians like Michael Behe and others argue about complexity, we're arguing about a specified complexity that's irreducible. Okay. And so you can look at the book Darwin's Black Box, and like I said, there may be answers out there to this, but in Darwin's Black Box, Behe arguments, he makes an argument for design in biology and claims that the molecular structure of life cannot be explained on the basis of chance or necessity, which is natural law. The argument for him is essentially a syllogism. It basically goes like this: molecular machines evidence specified complexity, i.e. they are contingent, complex, and specified. 2, specified complexity can't be explained on the basis of chance or necessity or the combination of chance and necessity.
Oh, thank you. Froze there for a second, MJ. MJ froze. Maybe it's just on mine. Y'all hit me with a 1 in the chat if MJ is frozen to y'all. I think we might have lost MJ. All right. You know what? Actually, I'll tell you what. Let me see if I find any ones here.
Okay.
Oh, there you go. He's back. Okay, cool.
Did you lose me? God, dog.
Yeah, I lost you again, man. It's all right. But you're back now, though. You're back now.
But let me just simplify real quick. In other words, when you look at the molecular structure of cells and things like that, what Behe is getting at in Darwin's black box is these parts that compose the cell are irreducible and they're complex. So what we have is irreducible complexity. And so when you take away one part from the cell, all of the others cease to operate. You need all the parts for the cell to be operational. And so when you understand evolution as each time something evolves or each time a jump is made, there's supposed to be some type of evolutionary survival advantage. But there's no advantage to one part of a cell that's not operational. Okay. And so you need the whole shebang for the thing to work.
Shebang, right.
Okay. You need the whole thing for it to work. And this is what Christians call irreducible complexity, not just mere complexity. And once again, and I will say this, there may be answers out there to it. People have written books, and Christians have written responses to it. But to simply look at a termite mound and say, well, we know that they don't know how to build it because when we kick it over, they won't rebuild it. Well, maybe the animals or whatever that we're studying have enough information to know that, hey, if we rebuild it in the same place, the same danger that kicked it over in the first place could kick it over again. And therefore, let's move on for safety reasons.
Right. And, it's kind of silly, too. Well, yeah, you're right, because he makes a presupposition about, their capabilities or intentions and what they can or can't do. But I think it was funny, though. He says something like, we know they don't have a design because if we kick it down, they can't rebuild it. But, I mean, they built it the first time. So like, why not, think that there's some kind of design at hand, whether you attribute that, he attributes it to instinct, however you want to look at it. But nevertheless, they built it the first time, right? So it doesn't make sense that, they don't know how to build it. They don't have a design. Clearly, they have something, working within them, to have built it. Now, whether you want to call that mind, in some sort of like diminished proto sense, or whether you want to call it, instinct, whatever. I think it's funny to me that in his analogy, he's saying that he's making the case that you don't find, I guess, like, some sort of design in nature. But I think it's interesting when he uses the cathedral example and the termite example. In each example, you have some sort of causal agent that is acting upon, some sort of material to bring about an effect. You have some sort of agent. By agent, I mean, a being that is capable of bringing about an effect. You have some sort of agent that's bringing about an effect, i.e., the termites with their termite tunnel or whatever you call it, termite castle, and then the cathedral. You had the guy who was the French engineer that we talked about. Now what he's proposing, if naturalism is, well, I just say if atheism is true, then he's proposing the cathedral without the French engineer, or the termite castle without the termites, right? That's what follows from his analogy. Now, is he suggesting that the termite castle could come about without the termites, or that the French engineer, the cathedral without the French engineer, could that have come about? Well, I would just say that if I'm walking along and I see this huge cathedral somewhere, and somebody asks me where it came from, I'll be like, nowhere, or just nobody built it. That would seem pretty counter to rationality. that would seem pretty silly, right? Now, what's interesting is I'm going to actually use an example, because if you have somebody in the chat who said something, I think I'm going to go off script here a little bit, but I think it kind of gives us a good example. Give me 1 second here of what we're talking about. I'm not trying to be mean-spirited, but I do think this is helpful. So, loving one another, it seems to be very critical of the intelligent design argument. He says, ha, 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 is this the same intelligent design argument, the arrogance we have? You wouldn't say the same thing for a cockroach, the same cult that believes the entire universe was made for one species. Now that's interesting, so I want to kind of, tease out something, right? And this kind of gets back to what you were saying, MJ, about the, we'll call it the atheist hypothesis. And, basically, I would say it's limited ability to really provide a robust explanation that's worthy of being a worldview. Okay, so we're starting with the intelligent design argument, right? When it comes to intelligent design, we're not just dealing with, as what's his name, Sebastian Kole is in the video, like, we're not just dealing with termites here. Okay, and indeed, actually, we're not even just dealing with biological complexity, right? There's actually a family of arguments that we refer to as teleological arguments, right? And actually, biological complexity is just one version of it. But when we're talking about, say, the fine-tuning argument, you take a step back from biology and get to physics, the very physics that underlies the universe and allows us to exist as we are, and allows for this universe to be in such a way that any life at all can exist. We talk about the fine-tuning argument in that regard. You find that there's a litany of physical constants and quantities that had to be present right at the initial event that brought about creation, that allowed for the universe to expand and develop in such a way that allows for any life at all. So, a common one that people will refer to, a common example of fine-tuning, rather, that people refer to is the cosmological constant. You can talk about there's a lot of different directions we can go, but just put it this way: if the universe were expanding, just a hair's breadth faster, than it is, or a hair's breadth slower than it is, or just say a hair's breadth faster, then it would expand so fast that particles wouldn't be able to interact. You wouldn't have chemistry and physics as we see in our universe, and that wouldn't allow for the universe to exist in such a way that it yields life. Or if it was too slow, if the force of the universe expanding was too slow, then the universe would collapse back onto itself, due to gravitational pull. And again, you wouldn't have a universe that can yield life, and so on and so forth. And so you have this on a razor's edge, as many people will refer to, like the universe existing in such a way that it allows for life. It's not expanding too fast, it's not too slow, and that's very remarkable. And I can list out a bunch of other ones, or I could just refer you to a very accessible version of the fine-tuning argument, and On Guard. Shout out to William Lane Craig. But anyway, just for the sake of keeping it moving, that's just one example. But the universe exists in such a way that, actually it's probably, we're just talking about chance, if you will. That's a very unlikely basis, for this universe coming about in such a way that it yields life. And you'd be hard pressed to say that the universe is structured as it is, or fine-tuned as it is by necessity. It had to be that way. There seems to be no reason for that. And so then you have this other option, that it's intelligently designed. That's kind of the inference of the best explanation. I'm not going to go further than that because we can spend a whole hour on it. I think I have a video on it anyway. But I just want to say that, it's this idea that fine-tuning or intelligent design is as simple as termite castles is silly. Now, here's the thing. What we were talking about earlier is not only does the Christian hypothesis deal with the physical universe. I do think the physical universe can account for itself. I do think that you need an intelligent creator behind it. But, to kind of go with this guy's comment, I find it interesting. Two things I see here, even in his name, love, or her maybe, loving one another, right? Even in the name, you have this moral concept of love, right? And you have this notion, he or she says, the arrogance that we have, that you wouldn't, say the same for a cockroach. It talks about arrogance. So love and arrogance, these are these moral concepts. And I would argue that those moral concepts can't be accounted for on an atheistic or naturalistic paradigm either, right? I think that if naturalism is true, or I'll just brought it up, I'll just say, I think if atheism is true, if there is no God, then I think that you're hard pressed to find some sort of natural basis for objective morality. And if you don't have objective morality, then at best you might have subjective morality. But nevertheless, I think that what you do is you suck the life out of these moral concepts that this person is appealing to in terms of love and the weightiness of what they mean by arrogance. I mean, both of those concepts lose steam if you can't give an ultimate account of an objective love and an objective basis of immorality, of which would be arrogance or whatever. If you can't really give an objective basis for either one of those, then those terms kind of become meaningless. So whether it be dealing with the natural world in terms of I think again the necessity for an intelligent designer, or these moral concepts that people just weave into, or they're just woven into our daily lives that we just interact with all the time. I think that a atheistic hypothesis can't account for either of them. And so it's just kind of inescapable. I think you have to broaden beyond just natural explanations, as many people seem to be uncomfortable with doing. But yeah, what you want to say there, bro?
But yeah, I mean, you were talking about the different families of design or teleological arguments. I think one of the more devastating teleological arguments is the argument for reason. And like I said, we can broaden this thing out and make it so broad where we point to our reasoning capabilities and our cognitive faculties being able to tell us the truth of what's going on outside of us. And like I said, all science hinges on this, mathematics hinges on this, reason and logic hinges on this. Evolution only deals with survivability, not necessarily truth. And so we can broaden out the design argument to even include the argument from reason.
Yeah, absolutely. Or I mean, we can take it even further, right? You have, well, I'll raise two things. I mean, number one, when it comes to mathematics, right? The whole project of science, they presuppose mathematical truths all the time. And when you look at the world outside, if you will, I'm saying outside, just us aside, if you just look at the world as it is, it seems to be situated on this like a mathematical structure. You know what I'm saying? Mathematics really is like a language. I mean, anything that you see in physics, happening in the physical world can be expressed mathematically. But nevertheless, we have this mathematical structure to the universe that seems to be inexplicable. You know what I'm saying? On naturalism alone, like why is it the case that we don't just see chaos, if you will, but rather we see a universe that is ordered with such mathematical precision, right? But nevertheless, aside from that, not only do we have this universe that's finely tuned and structured in such a on this scaffold of mathematics and mathematical truths, but also just we find ourselves in the universe that for the atheists, basically came from nothing, for nothing, and by nothing. Way down the road produces beings like us who have rational faculties that can even apprehend what's going on in the external world and explore, mathematics and the way that things are. So again, consciousness and the degree to which we're able to engage in rational pursuits seems to be, quite frankly, I think it's just silly, on a naturalistic paradigm. I recognize that be inflammatory to some, but nevertheless, I think that it's true. I think it's highly unlikely that we would have rational beings with the capacity to explore all these things, scientifically, math, as I talked about, and so forth. If basically reality boils down to just physical determinism, physical things happening and causing other physical things, I think that's very unlikely. But anyway, we want to get to the last clip. So, you ready to roll?
Oh yeah.
Design inherent in it. That does not mean it cannot produce complexity. I just want to put that out there because I'm tired of people saying that. If a human being could define for me what a soul is, where do I find it? What does it look like? How do I affect it? What does it affect? Then I could tell you if I have one. Now, some people say, well, the soul is the mind, the will, and the emotion. Okay, then that means I can find it's the byproduct of my brain. Okay, it's just a byproduct of being awake and aware. I have mind, I have will, I have emotion. Well, if that's what you're asking for, then yes, I definitely have a soul. Does my mind, will, and emotion somehow connect me to some ethereal world? Of course not. Of course not. I have no proof that my mind, will, and emotion can will anything to be. Right? I have no proof. There is no evidence that my mind can do anything other than affect this physical world. And I'm okay with that because my job is to master this physical world. I want to be successful here in this life. I want to find peace, love, joy, happiness, food, clothing, and shelter, protection, and provision in this life. And the soul don't help me do that. The spirit don't help me do that unless you can show me proof that these things exist and somehow this intangible can interact with the tangible. Somehow the metaphysical interacts with the physical. I'd like to see how that happens. Show me the mechanism by which it could. I'll accept that. Show me the effects of it. I'll accept that.
All right. He said he'll accept that, man. We got a tall task, man. You talking about the soul here, bro. What you think? What you think?
Oh yeah. It's a tall task, but like I said, there's an abundant amount of literature on it, and I think that Mr. Cole should avail himself to it. It's not like Christians have shied away from these things.
No, I agree, man. I mean, I think that again, he just seems to be. It doesn't seem like he's very well studied on the viewpoint that he's critiquing, right? He says that, how do we identify or define the soul? Well, I would identify the soul as being an immaterial substance that is the seat of mental activity. That's what I would say. It's the immaterial substance that is the seat or that houses mental activity, right? Or consciousness. Now, when I say substance, it needs to be understood that I'm using substance in a philosophical way, right? When we think about substances, we think about like metals and liquids and stuff like that. But when it comes to when you read books on the philosophy of mind, you'll see them pretty much catch out the way I did. And we're talking about substances. We're talking about particular objects or particular entities, a discrete entity of some sort. So yeah, I would say that the soul is a immaterial substance that houses mental activity and is not spatially or temporally extended. Now, spatially extended, right? Excuse me, I'm sorry, coughing here in the mic. Super unprofessional. Sorry. Anyway, but yeah, that's how I define the soul. And I think that when it comes to evidence of there being a soul, I think we've got great arguments. I think we've got a number of great arguments. Excuse me, I got to cough again. So yeah, go ahead and comment, man. I got to drink some of this water here.
Okay. So the brother's talking about the soul, and he's saying ultimately that it doesn't exist. So once again, the criteria that he's using is coming from naturalism. Naturalism does not, certain forms of naturalism does not deny that there can be things like thoughts, hopes, values, and things like that. It just denies that, it just basically postulates that they're emergent from the brain, so to speak. You good, bro?
Yeah, I'm good, man. I'm sorry about that. I was out here struggling, bro. I was out here struggling, man. Phone in the mouth trying to answer this question. Like
messing with my equipment and messing with you.
Right. Yeah. So let me backtrack for a second. But in terms, I define the soul. But in terms of reasons as to why we'd affirm the soul, first of all, we talk about evidence. I mean, there's different kinds of evidence, right? I don't believe that the term evidence itself is necessarily restricted to scientific evidence, if you will. Now, we might incorporate scientific evidence into coming to some conclusion, but there's such thing as philosophical evidence. I'm saying that we can have arguments, we can bring things of that logically follow to bear, such that one is rational to come to a certain conclusion. But nevertheless, when I think about, I'll just backtrack for a second. If the natural world is all there is, right? If that's true, and everything basically came about due to the Big Bang or some physical beginning, however, we'll just call it the Big Bang. If that's true, if those two things are true, and there's no God, just everything is the physical universe. If that's true, then everything that we see happening in the natural world is just like a falling of dominoes, beginning at the Big Bang on down to today. That's really all we have is physical things causing other physical things, right?
By chance, yeah. By
chance, right? You know what I'm saying? It's not determined. It's not orchestrated by any external agent or anything like that. It's just physical things by chance, falling like dominoes. Now, if that's true, then it would be the case that even our thoughts are not really our thoughts in the sense that we commonly think about it. Actually, what it would be the case is that the physical components of the brain are moving about, as again, it's just another of those falling dominoes. I'm saying they're just fizzing about, due to physical causes that go all the way back to the Big Bang. We're not really in control of what we think. Everything is just physically determined, even our thoughts, right? Now, if that's true, then we don't have things. I would argue that we don't have freedom of the will. I would say that it's not the case that I can choose to refrain from, ending this live stream right now, or it's not the case that I can choose to freely choose to answer your questions if you were to ask me something or whatever, or not move my hands right now. Everything is just physically determined. Everything that I will do, think, whatever, is all physically determined. Now, I think that picture of our mental life is certainly false. I think that it is the case that my thoughts, my emotions, my ideas, whatever, my intentions, I do think that I'm an agent, that is in the driver's seat of those things to some extent or another. Now, we're going to leave theological determinism off the table for right now. People can, we can discuss that another time, but just dealing with naturalism versus theism, I do think that I'm in the driver's seat of my mental life, to some extent or another, right? Now, it's not to say that I may not have influences, but I think that there's a real me that sits in a position to, make decisions and think things and so on and so forth. Now, the fact that I have, some sort of autonomy from just being a domino falling in terms of all of my thoughts and actions, the fact that I do have some sort of freedom of the will, that tells me that there must be some seat of consciousness. And my will must reside somewhere other than just the physical brain, because the physical brain on naturalism would just be that fizzing, like I talked about, right? So there must be something beyond the physical that is the seat of my mental life. And that's why, and I would argue that on that basis, we have good reason to think that we have a soul. We have an immaterial substance that is the seat of our mental life. Now, people can say what they want about, you can study what you want, about science, but my mental life is as obvious to me, as anything could possibly be. I'm saying I have a very, we call deep intuition, a justified intuition. And by intuition, I don't mean just a feeling, but I'm talking in philosophical terms. I have a justified, deeply rooted intuition that I am indeed, like I said, in the driver's seat of my mental life. And so that right there is evidence. Gives me some ground to say, you know what, actually, it's not the case that I'm just this physical entity, just my brain and body reacting or falling in line with those dominoes going back to the first physical incident, it was called the Big Bang. The other side would be that somebody mentioned it too. I think it was Apologetics in Detroit. I do think that NDEs, near-death experiences, some people appeal to that. I think that's a viable way to go and argue for the soul. But even without having to commit to that, the fact that conceptually, right, the soul is at least possibly disembodiable, right? Then we're getting into modal logic, but it's at least possible disembodiable. But I would say that my physical self is obviously not possibly disembodiable. So there's something different between the me that I was referring to earlier, and the physical me. But y'all don't want to get too far afield there. But nevertheless, when he says, do we have, is there evidence, that we have a soul? Of course. I think the fact that you have a mental life, that's not scripted by physics itself, I think that tells you something about the nature of your mental life and that it's not something that's completely beholden to physical causes. I've got a whole video on this. As a matter of fact, the argument that I developed called the scan argument, that's I'll put it in the description where I go into this in more detail to give a more principled argument here. But I at least wanted to kind of touch on that. But he says that, he attributes the mind, will, emotions to just the brain, right? Well, actually, I will say this. I'll kind of spill the beans on this, and then I'll let it go. Maybe we'll get to some questions. People can put some questions in the chat if you want to ask something. We'll take Patreon questions first. But if it is the case to say our emotions, for example, if that's all attributable to the brain, okay, let's say the brain and the body. If the scenario that I described, where all of our mental life is just a falling of dominoes, right, in the brain that produces our emotions, right, because that's what that would be. He even says that the emotions are a byproduct of the brain. Now, if that's true, then we should expect that our emotions don't correspond to our human experience. You know what I'm saying? We should expect that our emotions don't correspond to our human experience, because emotions, if they're just byproducts of the physical happenings of the brain, have nothing to do with our environment or our experiences. They have to do with what's going on in the brain. And so, what you should see is you should see lives being lived out that are emotionally incoherent. You know what I'm saying? They should correspond to the physical happenings of the brain, not the actual happenings of people's lives. But we don't experience that. We don't experience lives that are emotionally incoherent. We experience lives that do seem to align with where we have emotions that correspond to things that we interact with. So that tells us that our emotions aren't just blips, that are brought about due to firings in the brain. Which is actually, that gets to the last thing I wanted to say. He talked about, can you show me a mechanism that where you have the immaterial, i.e., the soul, interacting with the material? And I appreciate him bringing up that objection, because that's a common one, what they call the interaction problem. If you have this immaterial soul and a physical body, how do they interact? But I think that it's an outdated argument, because I don't think that he's read up on the philosophy of causation. Because if you had, then you would know that all causation, unless you're going to posit an infinite regress of causes, all causation, at some point, you're going to have to suggest that there's some, what they call a basic interaction between two entities. And, a basic interaction gets down to where one entity interacts with another, and you can't go any further to find a mechanism. That's essentially, what it comes down to. And so we can argue, that the soul interacts with the physical body in what we call a basic way. It's a basic interaction. And if that's not suitable, then you have one or two problems. You can either say, okay, well, that's not suitable, I won't rock with it. But at the same time, now you're going to have to basically just throw away your whole notion of causation of anything. That means that your notion of any type of causation goes out the window. So we can just argue that it interacts with, in a basic way. Or we could say information, right? We know that our physical brains are impacted by information. I'm a mental health professional. I can tell you that's the case. I'm saying, when you deal with people who, I give you a perfect example. I won't even go to mental health route. If I say to you, actually, I won't say you. If somebody says to me, Adam Coleman, your grandma just passed away, right? Let's say that I can barely hear that person. I don't hear them all the way. I just hear the tones of their voice, but I don't hear what they actually said, right? I might ignore it and keep doing what I'm doing. But if they come closer and say, Adam, no, your grandma just passed away, when that information registers, it's going to cause a physical reaction. There's going to be something that happens in my brain, chemicals that come about that have to do with sadness. I might have my eyes might start watering, i.e. crying. I might start feeling a pumping in my chest and things of that nature, all because of some information that I received. So we have examples in everyday life of information impacting the physical. We know that that's the case. We know that it's the case that when a child is traumatized, right, you may experience some negative words or something like that, or any different level. We know that it has a physical impact on the brain. We know that happens. So we can study that out. That's not mysterious. Now, maybe in terms of how that happens is mysterious, but we know that it happens. And I think that's where this gentleman is getting caught up. Like he's confusing a how versus a that. We know that non-physical things, i.e. information, can impact the physical in some sense or another, particularly in our mental life. You know what I'm saying? We know that is the case. Now, how? Hey, I mean, there's all kinds of things that we don't have a full explanation of how, but I don't need to have a to Z explanation of how something happens to know that it happens. Just like I don't really know how this light switch in my room is gonna flip on and on. I don't know. I don't know how electricity works. I don't know how it does. I'm not a mechanic. I do know that if I flip that switch over there, it's gonna the lights are gonna go off there. So yeah, all right, yeah. I was talking a lot there. What you got to say, bro?
Yeah. I mean, I think even our capacity to reason, that is to draw rational inferences, is another example of this internal evidence that we've been talking about for God, or internal experience that needs explanation, and that this brother's naturalism cannot account for. And natural selection, the blind, unconscious, automatic process, which was discovered by Darwin, which we know is the explanation of the existence of which is the explanation of a parent non-purposeful form of life, has no purpose in the mind. It has no mind and no mind's eye. It does not plan for the future. It has no vision, no foresight, nothing at all. It's just blind. It's just chance processes taking place. Okay. And in other words, and what I'm getting at here, our cognitive faculties gradually developed on this brother's hypothesis, pursuant to the dictates of the laws of physics. Okay. implying that instances of thinking, which he's called us to think. This brother's calls us to think through these things, to use common sense. And that these instances of thinking are actually occurrences that ultimately are likewise expressions of the laws of physics. In other words, we're just physics.
Yeah.
I have a hard time accepting that human reason is the result of blind purposes, non-rational processes. And if we accept that, we would also have to accept the fact that the deliverances of our human reason, even to accept, and here it is, even to accept that naturalism is true, is severely undercut.
Right. I agree.
Because how can we accept that what he's saying is even true if our cognitive faculties and our reasoning process is just once again frontal lobe material physical states?
Right.
And I just think that this brother hasn't, once again, I just don't think he's thought it through. And the soul, I think the soul plays a big role in that.
I agree.
And I'm gonna throw a bone at my presuppositional fellas, is I think free will is a precondition of intelligibility for your transcendental argument.
Trying to stir up the pot, bro. You trying to stir it up. Well, hey, man, I want to take some questions.
Yeah.
Just a couple questions here. I know we got to get out of here in a second, but go ahead and put some questions in the chat if you have some. Try to keep it on topic as best you can. But while we're doing that, I do want to address this here because I think it gives us opportunity. First of all, as you were saying about, again, getting into our rational faculties, just to kind of give another nugget here, we can talk about the concept of mental causation, right? So, for example, if I say that all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is immortal, right? You got two premises and you got a conclusion. The reason why you can work your way from those premises to the rationality or the soundness of that conclusion or sounds of that argument to see the conclusion, the reason you can do that is what's called mental causation. You can get from A, this thought A, to B and then get to C, if you will, right? Now, if it is the case that our brains, that there's nothing to the mind beyond the brain and there's nothing beyond this natural world, and physical determinism is true, if you kind of throw those things in the mix, then that's a worldview that can account for mental causation, because it would indeed be the case that our rational faculties are not able to get us from that A to the B to the C, but rather they would only be going from this physical event to that physical event, independent of, whatever it is that I guess we would want to be thinking about. I'm saying, but we don't see that in our experience. We are able to go from A to B to C. We are able to experience mental causation. So that gives us reason to think that, actually, it probably is not the case that our brains are just, everything in our minds are just products of physically antecedent events. But now what's interesting here is that, loving one another. And you know what? Let's pray for loving one another, man. We ain't hating on nobody. I love everybody that comes through, and I appreciate pushback. I'm not trying to be, anybody that knows me knows I'm not trying to be, mean or anything like that. But he's raising some things that he or she is raising some things that I think are pertinent to our discussion. It says, God of the gaps again. Theists seek refuge in knowledge unknown. We don't fully understand information, so theists answer that they can't imagine it being by natural means, hence God. Absurd. Now, I don't know if they're talking about when I was referring to DNA, or when they're talking about when I was talking about I think this came when I was talking about information impacting the brain. But let's just deal with that for a second. First of all, when I was talking about information in regards to the brain, I wasn't making an argument for God at that point. I was actually responding to what Sebastian Kole was talking about with evidences for the soul. I was saying that information, he asked about a mechanism by which the immaterial can impact the material. He was saying it's kind of as if that's mysterious. And I was simply saying that we have examples in our everyday life of the immaterial impacting the material, because we know that information can have a direct impact on, excuse me, can bring about a physical reaction, right? So at that point, I wasn't arguing for theism. Now I do think that that some sort of what we call dualism is true. I do think that it is the case that we have some sort of immaterial hub of consciousness. I think that that is true, and I think that theism is the best explanation for that. But as far as what I was responding to a second ago, I was merely dealing with the fact that it's not the case that we don't have any grounds for thinking that the immaterial can interact with material, because we see it happen all the time with respect to how information can bring about physical change. Yeah, did you want to say anything on that, or?
No, I mean, I think that's what she was what he or she may have been pointing at. I have simply been presenting what's called an undercutting defeater for why this brother thinks naturalism is true. So
Right. Oh, last thing I want to say, because actually Sebastian brought this up too. He said something about how we take what we don't know and we kind of plug God in there. I mean, again, that's a part of the God of the gaps argument. But when you look at the classical arguments for God's existence, people aren't taking up what we don't know, but it's a matter of what we do know. Actually, I'll just say this: all the arguments that I put on the table throughout this talk here is about what we do know. Like, we do know, we have good reason to affirm that the universe had a beginning. For example, we can base that upon philosophical arguments, and there are scientific evidences that seem to point to that. That's something that we do know. We do know, based upon the study of metaphysics and how causation works. We do have good reason to believe that things that begin to exist, have causes. Like, these are things that we do know. So when we're arguing for God's existence, we're not talking about things. It's not, the basis of it is not what we don't know; it's what we do know. Or information, for example. Well, I was talking about, the fine tuning, or a version of the teleological argument where you find information in DNA. We do know that language or information comes from minds. I'm saying we do know that. And even if it were the case that you found, or that somebody were to find information in nature somewhere, I would suggest that the best explanation for that is a mind behind it, because information we might refer to as specified complexity, is highly unlikely to come about with to the degree that we see in the natural world without a mind behind it. I'll just put it that way. So it's rational to infer, when you find information, that there's a mind behind it, and it kind of goes back to what I was saying. But again, I think it's one of those things where I don't know. I guess people feel like the God of the gaps thing is like this super weapon or something like that. The Christians can't get around, as if people haven't been grappling with stuff for years, but we have principled arguments that are based upon scientific fact and that draw from scientific fact and are grounded in reason, by which we can affirm that Christianity is true. So yeah,
I mean, what's the alternative? Science of the gaps?
Yeah, I get right.
Right. I mean, like, seriously.
Right. Science of the gaps is, we'll figure it out eventually.
Yeah,
that's science.
Give us time.
Give us time. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
But I was just gonna say, once again, it waffles on personal and scientific explanations. But once again, I mean, like I said, we just have no good reason to think naturalism is true, and I think that we kind of demonstrated that when you present undercutting defeaters, you don't attack the position directly. What you attack is the reason for thinking that it's true in the first place, and there's just no good reason to think that it's true. And so when you talk about induction, well, induction is built on a certain philosophy, because you can't prove induction by induction. You can't. Right. And so you can't resort to a science of the gaps and then accuse the Christian of a God of the gaps, because then at that point you're just being inconsistent.
But again, it's inconsistent, and it's again this. I find this category error because it's people trying to take mechanistic facts, if you will, facts about how the world works, and put it this way: it's like, again, trying to point out a fact about the Model T and prove that Henry Ford didn't exist. You know what I'm saying? That's silly. You know what I'm saying? That's silly. If you prove something about how I don't know, the laws of thermodynamics works, I mean, that in no way undermines the existence of God. I don't know why people feel like it's such like this trump card. You know what I mean? Now Ed says, when do these gods show up? I probably need you to clarify, what you mean by that. I don't really know what that person means. So maybe just kind of clarify it. We'll take a couple questions. We'll do super chats first if I see them. What is the reason for materialism? I'm not sure if I'm really in touch with what you're trying to get at with the question, but I would say this. I think that people are trying to explain. I think it really comes down to explanations. Like, what explains it all? What's the theory of everything, right? And broadly speaking, you have some people who would say that materialism, the fact that we just have this physical world and the forces that work therein, is all there is to it, and they believe that that's the best explanation for how reality actually is. Now I think that that's false. I think materialism is false. I don't think it's true that the physical world is a closed system. I don't think that this physical world is all that there is, and I think that we have reasons to affirm that materialism is false, including some of the ones we covered here today, where you have reason, to affirm that there is indeed a first cause or an immaterial soul, and thereby it needs to be a source for that soul and things like that. So yeah. All right. Anybody else? Any questions? Or man, I think you got a real fan right here and loving one another, man. I think we need to all go out to have some lunch or something like that, man, and have a discussion. I think we we got a real fan here, man. That's cool. That's what's up. All
right, let me just point some information out that I didn't get to like I should have. Now we opened up talking about worldviews, right? And that you can subject worldviews to certain tests. And I like to use 3 tests for certain worldviews. And materialism is a worldview. Naturalism is a worldview. These are worldviews. And they must be able to satisfy at least 3 tests. That's the test of reason, the test of experience, and the test of practice. A failure of any one of these tests is a red flag. Now, if your worldview self-destructs, and when we're talking about reason, the test of reason highlights the logical consistency and the logical coherence of a worldview. It points out that the worldview must first make sense of itself by fitting together in a coherent fashion. The worldview test, and I'm speaking of, relies on the fundamental laws of logic, and any violation is a strike against the worldview being possibly true. I'm pointing out that naturalism and materialism self-destruct. They are false. They are false. They cannot survive a logical analysis at all. And I think that when we pointed out, talking about our reasoning capabilities, in order to be able to reason and rationally infer that materialism is true, it self-destructs on analysis. It's over. It's a done deal. Try something else. It's false.
There it is. Oh, we do got one question here, man. I think it's kind of interesting. So, man, I do apologize. I feel like I'm going to mispronounce this, but Amir Eshafra. I gave my best shot. I apologize if I mispronounced that. He says, Tru-ID Apologetics. What are your thoughts on idealism versus materialism? Which theory best explains reality with the least amount of ad hoc reasoning? Now, this is interesting because I am begrudgingly gravitating towards some form of idealism. Now, idealism, there's lots of different types, and it's kind of above my pay grade at this point to really land somewhere. I do think, and this is going to get somewhat heady, but there are certain challenges that I think idealism solves. I think that when it comes to the fact that we have, I do believe that we have a mind, that is beyond the material. But I think that in addition to some of the responses that I gave to the interaction problem earlier, I think if idealism is true, that solves an interaction problem there. As a matter of fact, between this notion that you have a natural and a supernatural world or immaterial world and kind of that thing there, I think idealism solves what some people might think is a problem of that being kind of a clunky way of construing reality. Now, if he's asking the question, then I'm assuming he probably knows what I mean by that. I'm sorry if it's kind of sounding vague for people. But that being said, I think idealism is promising. There's still a couple aspects of it that I've got to kind of work out in my own head. But I think that it is possible. I'm going to get myself in trouble because I'm going to speak conjecturally here. Excuse me. This is the weird stuff that I think about when I'm driving down the street. I think that it's possible that it is the case that what we refer to as the natural world is indeed
emergent.
It's emergent in the sense of like it's exists in God's mind. I think that's possibly true. I think it could be the case that everything is information, and whereas we think that shout out to my man Brute Facts. He supported me. I feel a little bit better, man. So I'm not alone on an island. Shout out to him. Y'all definitely subscribe to his podcast as well. Dope podcast. But I think that when it comes to reality, it could be the case. Now I know this is going to sound super nerdy and heavy. These are kind of weird things I think about when I'm, irritating my wife about all my theories and stuff. It could be that everything we refer to as the physical world is information, and the immaterial world, like I'm referring to the soul, it could be the case that that's information. Now the question would be, how would those two things interact? Well, think of it this way. Let's think of like a computer. So you have numbers like ones and zeros that in the computer, right? I'm saying you can do all kinds of stuff with that, programming wise. You can bring about effects. I'm saying with those ones and zeros. But mathematics, or I'll just say numbers, are a type of information. But alphabets, letters, are also a type of information, right? And I'm saying that it could be that everything that exists is information, and our physical universe exists in the same sense. The physical universe exists differently than what we refer to as the spiritual realm, in the same sense that letters differ from numbers, yet they're both types of information. And in so much as they're both information, you can see how they can interact with one another in a way that is far more fluid and less clunky than what we might construe as being like a hard physical universe and like a hard spiritual universe, or a spiritual realm, if you will. So when it comes to idealism, I think that it could be the case that everything exists in some sense or another in God's mind. And the difference between the physical universe and the supernatural is analogous to the difference between like letters and numbers, both information, just information of different types. Man, I know that's like super like way out there, you know what I mean? But I think that if that is true, then that solves, certain problems. Again, like when it comes to like interaction problems between the soul and like how is it that information impacts the physical brain, like I was talking about earlier. It can provide a more sleek explanation of what reality is like versus a physical realm and the spiritual realm being separate from one another. I think it solves a lot of problems that way. But that's just me, since the person asked the question, that's just me, answering that question. Oh man, am I crazy? Am I crazy, Matt? What do you think, man?
No, I mean, like I said, we could thank Brother Michael Jones for a lot of this. And sometimes I find myself flirting with it too. I do think that there's a middle ground on and he expresses it well. So like I said, check out Inspiring Philosophy for more information on this. He has an excellent argument on the digital physics argument. I'd like to see my materialist friends really deal with that, because the brother is citing a lot of scientists to back his information up, and it's not fun when you're on the other side of that gun. So when you're dealing with his argument, I would hate to be an atheist debating him.
Well, and what's interesting is I somewhat alluded to this the other day when I was on Alex's channel. I was kind of giving a sip of this. I haven't worked all this way out of my head, but and I'm not saying I'm right about what I just said about information. I could be, but if it is the case that everything, if you have this idealism, if that's true, then I wonder if it would make certain sense of Christology, certain aspects of our Christology. When you think about John 1:1, where Jesus is the Logos, if you understand like what the Logos is, whether you look at I don't know what. Why is the dude's name escaping me right now? The philosopher guy. Jewish philosopher. Anyway, that'll come back to me in a second. But if you think about the logos or the memra, with Jesus being the word, essentially logos meaning like the intellect behind the universe and all creation. I'm saying if that's attributed to Christ, then that would make a whole lot of sense on an idealistic picture. You know what I'm saying? I think that makes a lot of sense. Where Jesus indeed is the mind, that undergirds all of what we call creation. That makes a whole lot of sense if we exist in Christ's mind. So
a good book for that is The Word of God and the Mind of Man by Dr. Ronald Nash. You can also get his book Augustine's Theory of Knowledge by Dr. Ronald Nash as well, and he talks about the Logos doctrine, which is based off of Augustine's epistemology, where he talks about Jesus being the divine Logos, which enlightens men, enlightens every man. That's in Scripture. And basically makes knowledge possible, also makes revelation possible by enlightening all men to be able to do things like mathematics, logic, and things like that. And like I said, we have this going all the way back to the African Bishop Augustine doing some heavy epistemology.
I'm sorry, Philo. That's what I was trying to think of. Philo in regards to logos. Yeah. Right. Man, I tell you, Amir, if Shaffer in here stirring stuff up, man, you got me on all kind of got me sounding crazy out here. But yeah, man, I guess if all hearts and minds are clear, man, we've been going for about 2 hours. I guess we can go ahead and wrap it up. You got anything you want to share, man, in terms of what's happening on your channel? Like what you got coming up?
I don't know. I got to get with my brother, and because we got a lot of stuff going on tomorrow, so we might have to push it to Friday. We was going to look at this statement on social justice. We was going to revisit that on a Saturday edition of a Freestyle Friday. And these are live streams that me and my brother Chris Brian Samuel, apologist in Detroit, take part in. I'm still debating if I'm gonna make my way to Chicago and see all you wonderful people. Also, there's another apologetics conference at the end of September in Dallas. This is the National Urban Apologetics Conference. It's going to have Dr. Mason, Pastor Jerome Gay, all the wonderful people, some of the writers from the book, Dr. Sarita Lyons. She's going to be there. It's going to be at Dallas Baptist University. I'm thinking September 25th. Don't quote me. Go look it up on Facebook.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay. So it's just a lot going on. God is good. And like I said, I enjoyed coming on here, man, and chopping it up, talking about that, because I'll talk your ear off all day when you at work.
Yeah, you know what it is, man. Yeah. We peoples, man. So with that being said, we're gonna be on your channel next time. Because man, there's like another 30 minutes, on this this interview that we could have chopped our way through. So we're gonna be doing that on your channel. So I'll make sure to let my viewers know, so we'll be over there. Y'all make sure y'all subscribe to MJ Jackson, and daggone it, man, this dude Phil Fox is out here getting buckets, man. I appreciate you, brother. Thank you, man. I just want to say thank you. I'm really not putting you up there to try to, whatever. I'm just saying because I truly am thankful. I wanted to make sure that I took note of it. Thank you for all the super chats. Thank you for all the questions. Shout out to Amir Shafra for stirring up trouble on my podcast. Got me out here looking crazy. Talking about idealism. He's still going with idealism. He says he's on idealism with some panpsychist stuff. You know what I mean? Corporations. It's interesting. And it was funny. I'm not going to go too far afield here, but I think bare bones panpsychism without a God to ground it, I think, to me, still falls short of a robust explanation. Because if you have, panpsychism is this notion that I'll just say consciousness or experience is fundamental to the physical realm itself. But I think that it still leaves questions from a contingency standpoint, like why would this panpsychist physical realm exist rather than nothing? And I think that that's going to point me back to a God, and then being at least explanatorily prior to why you have this universe with these panpsychist properties, if that is indeed the case. But that's what drives me back to idealism. So, but as far as your rendering of it, that might be kind of interesting. It might be pretty interesting. I see where you're going there. yeah, man. Appreciate y'all, man. I guess we're gonna get on out of here. Shout out to my man, Vader Henchman. We about to, record some stuff this Saturday, man. So y'all stay tuned on the channel for what we got coming. Y'all say a prayer for me, man. I am working on some pretty big projects. I'm trying to balance them all, among which is writing my book and things like that. So y'all say a prayer for your boy that my brains don't fall out and I'm able to get this stuff done and still put out content, man. So I appreciate y'all. Shout out to my man Brute Facts podcast. Make sure y'all subscribe to him as well. Y'all know what it is. Love God, love people. Take care of the things that God blesses you with. Peace.